thinks that you're out of your mind.
Everything you know is wrong.
Could it be? It's possible. Sex at Dawn, The Prehistoric Origins of Modern Sexuality, a new book by Christopher Ryan and Cecilia Jetha, is in the bookstores now, and it's an absolutely fascinating look, not just at sex. This goes way beyond that. Christopher Ryan is with us on the line. Christopher, you're in Barcelona, do I have that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, welcome. Louise and I were in Barcelona just a few months ago. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. In fact, I spoke at a conference there. Your book, Sex at Dawn, while the stuff that is going to get the headlines is the stuff about maybe monogamy isn't the norm for humans, and the bonobo and all that kind of stuff. What I found particularly fascinating was you're taking on, head on, some of the things. For example, you write about how in Journal Science in 1968, biologist Garrett Hardin's paper, The Tragedy of the Commons, has been embraced as sacred text by scholars. Basically what he said is that freedom in the commons brings ruin to all of us. You argue that's not the case, that we're not DNA wired to be libertarian me-firsters.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one example of several that we cite of the power of an idea that appeals to powerful people. Right. Andrew Carnegie was one of the early champions of Charles Darwin. He made sure that the origin of species was in every one of the libraries that he set up. The reason for that is that it fits in perfectly with the ends justify the means, the superior species rises to the top philosophy that was popular among people like Andrew Carnegie.
Right, and wasn't it one of Darwin's cousins, was it Sir Francis Galton, as I recall, was a big proponent right after that of basically survival of the fittest economics, based, in arguing that Darwin proved his theory?
Yeah, I believe he's one of the founders of the eugenics movement.
Yes,
as well.
Yeah. So let's first talk about sex and get that out of the way, since that's the title of your book, Sex at Dawn. This is one of the most comprehensive sociological and anthropological analysis of the literature and of science, over the last century that I've read in a long, long time. I think you've done a much better job than a lot of people have in these areas. What is the natural sexuality of humans?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for that summation of our work. That's very gratifying. The word natural, when applied to human beings, is very problematic, because whatever it is that you might claim is natural, someone can always say, yeah, but it's natural for humans to be adaptive. That's what we do best. We respond to changing conditions very adeptly, right. And that's true. So it's sort of a circular conversation. But if we define natural as being congruent with our evolved predispositions, which seems to be a pretty good definition of natural, yeah, then we would say that the natural sexual behavior for human beings is a casual, you might say promiscuous sexuality, where any given adult is going to have several ongoing, overlapping sexual friendships at any given time. That seems to be what we're designed for, and it seems to be sort of the default sexual behavior of people who aren't dealing with strong social prohibitions against that sort of behavior.
Yeah, you tell the story of, on page 288, the curse of Calvin Coolidge, about Calvin Coolidge and his wife were visiting a commercial chicken farm, and Calvin Coolidge says, and the guy said he has a small number of roosters, a large number of hens, and Calvin says, how do you get all those, how do you produce all these fertile eggs? And the guy says, oh, our roosters are really active. He's getting it on with a lot of hens every day. And Silent Cal says, please tell that to Mrs. Coolidge. And then Mrs. Coolidge says, does each of the cocks serve the same hen each time? And he says, oh, no, he always changes from one hen to another. And, I'm sorry, this was his wife first. I'm getting the story backwards. Why don't you tell the story?
Oh, now you've already told the punchline.
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, his.
The essence is that males of chickens and humans and many other species are particularly attracted to sexual variety.
Yeah.
In fact, in bulls, cows, a bull will have sex with a cow once or twice and then refuse to do it again. So they have to take blankets and rub them on other on other cows, and then drape them over the cow to trick the bull into thinking it's a different cow. So this is common in across species, and how it functions in human beings is debatable, especially to the extent that it functions within women, because there's quite a bit of evidence that women are also attracted to variety in sexual partners.
Right.
But talking about women's sexuality is complicated because you have to look at changes throughout the life cycle and also changes throughout the menstrual cycle. So when she's ovulating, she might be particularly attracted to variety in partners, whereas when she's not ovulating, she may not be.
Yeah. On page 199, the great quote, just wrapping up this chapter, The Never-Ending Battle Over Prehistoric War, you took on one of the... in fact, his name is Mr. Pinker. He wrote War Before Civilization, The Myth of the Peaceful Savage, and sort of like the myth of the ecological Indian, one of these guys who says he's going to debunk conventional wisdom. And you point out that the, quote, savage tribes or native tribes or indigenous people that he's citing as being highly violent aren't actually hunter-gatherer societies, which is the majority of human prehistory. They have adopted agriculture, they're using tools, they're interacting with us, and you conclude this chapter by saying the evidence, both physical and circumstantial, points to a human prehistory in which our ancestors made far more love than war. Can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, what you're talking about there is a presentation that Steven Pinker gave to the TED the conference in California.
Right, that is available virally in video all over the internet, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. It's an excellent website. And he's drawing on work by Keeley, who wrote the book that you referred to there. Mm-hmm. There's sort of a whole school of scholars who are arguing that war is part of our primordial primate past. And so what Pinker's arguing is that we're getting more and more peaceful all the time as we move away from that primordial past. Casilda and I, after really looking at the available data, came to the conclusion that that's a completely erroneous, false argument. And when we looked at the tribes that Pinker refers to in his presentation and also in the blank slate where he also presented this information, I think he has seven. He lists seven different groups. Six of them are indisputably not hunter-gatherers.
Right.
And only one, you could even argue, was sort of a hunter-gatherer society.
So in the half a minute we have left here, we're talking with Christopher Ross and his new book, Sex at Dawn. What is the natural state of Christopher Ryan? Excuse me. What is the natural state of humans with regard to violence and war and competition?
Well, again, it's like asking what the natural state of H2O is. It depends on the conditions, right? But if the natural state is probably liquid under most of the conditions on Earth at the moment, and so under most of the time human beings have been alive, there hasn't been anything really worth fighting over. Interesting.
So we didn't fight.
No, it's much easier to walk away rather than fighting over something.
We cooperated rather than competed.
Exactly.
By and large. Christopher Ryan. This is a brilliant, absolutely brilliant book. Christopher Ryan's Sex at Dawn. Let me strongly recommend this to you. Christopher, thanks for dropping by today.
It's been my pleasure.
Enjoy Barcelona. It's a beautiful city. For more on this and other topics, please visit thomhartmann.com.